Hello, everyone, and welcome to this 48th Urban AI conversation, for which I have the great pleasure and the great honor of welcoming Ben van Berkel. Hi, Ben.
Hi.
So, Ben, it's a true pleasure to have you to this ongoing conversation. You were one of the very first, architect I met during my Urban AI journey, and also when I founded Urban AI like few years ago. So it's really a pleasure to do this together. The goal of this conversation is really to, in a sense, have your vision on urban AI, but not only. You will see actually more broadly your vision on the future of cities and architecture. Just that. So it will be a kind of 1 hour conversation. We will then be joined by an urban AI member. You will have the surprise. I'm not saying his name yet. As usual, feel free to use the chat first to introduce yourself, and also if you have any questions, remarks you would like to share during the conversation. And if you've been following previous episodes, that I will definitely be asking your questions. So Ben, we've been presenting extensively you during the last few days on our social media, but maybe if it's needed, you're principal architect and founder of UNStudio. And you've been obviously shaping and building kind of iconic architecture figures such as Erasmus Bridge or Möbius House, and maybe we will actually discuss it later. I might have a first question, actually. While preparing this webinar, I read one of your interview where you said, "What is needed today is less imagery and more meaning. Let's free ourselves from style in order to embrace more important issues." Could you share more on what you mean in this fascinating sentence?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's of course always difficult to see that sometimes architects have a sort of preconceived idea about a style, because I always thought that if you think about fashion design, or the car industry, or any other kind of creative industry, that style is something what you can interpret more flexibly, and in many different ways and levels of how you formulate it and articulate it. But I've always liked the idea that you could uh, get away from preconceived ideas of style, because I think that it is much more important to be transformative in the way how you work. So I used always the game between the way how we played with simple geometries in architecture and more articulated, or blob, as was said in the early 90s, blob architecture. So how would you move from a box to a blob, was my argument. And who cares about the blob or the box, maybe, but let's think about the transformative moment between something that is fixed on one side and fixed on the other side. So I easily move from one side to the other side when it comes down to, yeah, call it style. I want to liberate style in a way. And the reason is because I think that organizational qualities of architecture, sustainability principles, the experience of architecture, the the way how we could actually bring much more health qualities into spatial experiences, so that you really feel better in an environment today. I find it much more important than style. I'm always a bit nervous when people start to refer to any style in architecture. I think we should get rid of it.
On this idea of kind of creating health through like architectural forms, can you explain more on how you're doing it, like how you're kind of activating bodies through your projects?
Yeah, the idea came in the early age of the whole discussion around sustainability in architecture, because of course, as you know me, and UNS or UNStudio, we we like to we like to give things a twist and rethink what sustainability could mean. And we always thought that if you think about the planet and everything what is happening with the planet right now, then we might say, yeah, oh, of course, we need to save the planet and we need to make a better environment for all of us. But if you think about indoor environment, so the way how kids are having education in schools, or if we think about hospitals or the work environments, indoor environments are far often more unhealthier than the outdoor environments. Bad air quality, not enough daylight, bad acoustics, toxic materials. So we thought it was much more important to combine sustainability with health. And what I mean by health is that you make that you make spaces much more attractive on three levels. So on the level of social health, so community building, so people meet more in buildings or around the buildings or in the city. And then we call it social health, but then you have physical health. So how can you bring in more active design in buildings so that people walk more and don't take the elevator? I always argue people don't like elevators. People don't talk in elevators with each other. So let's stimulate walkability much more because it's healthier, and also of course make air systems better. So we have improved air systems by air what is pressured out from the floor up to the ceiling, so it doesn't roll in the spaces, and then bacteria don't move from one person to the other. And it's used in operation rooms, for instance. And we were actually already recognizing that we could reduce down with that sick leave in office environments. So that helped. Um, Acoustics, etc. So that's also the part of physical health. And then mental health is the other aspect, because I think that people like to feel safe in the built environment. And I have other tools what we use for that in order to combine that with BREEAM technology or BREEAM standards, sorry. And for that we developed our own standard system in order to offer more for the built environment.
In what you are sharing, there is a kind of, let's say, two directions. Like the first one, which is kind of creating a shelter or a kind of protective structure into which like health might be stimulated and protected. And you also have another direction, I think, of your work on the Möbius House, when you said that the goal was really, in a sense, to kind of create a continuum with the landscape. So like how do you kind of create a balance between those two elements being both protective and very open in a sense to the world?
Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned the Möbius house, because that was an earlier prototype of many things we later on still use in our buildings. Like what was the beauty of the Möbius house is that there already the discussion of what would it be to work in at home. For instance, the two parents, they were interested to have their own workspace, and I'm talking about 1996, 7 or something like that. So they were really quite visionary. These two clients, they said, well, I want to have my own workspace. We would like to hear the children, or not hear the children when they come late home, but we'd like to see them. So the whole experiential quality of family life was one thing. To be connected to the landscape in this kind of Möbius structure was an experiential strategy where we now all talk about, because the experience of architecture becomes, luckily enough, a good discussion in our field. But we combine that often with the topic of health, because we say that if you, for instance, if you walk in a curve, you can much better see who's behind you, and it feels much more comfortable than walking in a linear line, because then you can't see who's behind you or whatever. So the Möbius House experiences gives you, we use it as an experiment, I should say, to see what you could do in order to have not a dead end in the house, but a continuous life of meeting with the landscape, with the family, with your workspace, and the living space, and the sleeping environment. So this continuum was not having an end, and that double reading we like to give to our organizations of architecture, because that's what I forgot to say when we talk about style. I find the organization of architecture far more fascinating than what kind of recognition you give to the outside of the building. Although, don't forget me, I like, of course, to give architecture a reading, but is also double reading from the outside. But it most of the time starts from the organizational strategy, how the architecture falls in its place.
I might have maybe one last question on the style and like your architecture vision before we move to AI, because it's the urban AI conversation.
Yeah.
But there is really a question I wanted to ask you on the atmosphere, and like what's the role for you of atmosphere in your project?
I like atmosphere. I like to think of a place where you come to is a place where you'd like to come back to. So what I mean by that is that to create environments who formulate a new form of reality than the reality you have seen on the outside, or when you are in the city creates another reality for you. But I'd like to create other realities and atmospheres in the home. For instance, that you feel that maybe your home is your holiday home. Maybe I like to bring the holiday home home. So that you suddenly have a sort of form of super living or something like that. So I always think about these ideas. Or that when you go to the theater, of course, if you go to the theater, you're already in another world, and suddenly another, you step in another reality. But that should not only start from the moment that you go into the theater itself, but it should start already when you enter the building. That you then maybe you are yourself already an actor in the environment of going out and seeing people, and oh, you look good, and wow, what a wonderful color on the background you have there. You look better with that color on the background, or so I'm always thinking of how to create other atmospheres than the standard atmospheres. Yeah.
How do you achieve creating a specific atmosphere? Is it through intuition? Is it like how do you do it?
I look at art, and I read books, and I'm interested in films. I'm borrowing from other industries a lot, so that's what I do. Or fashion, I really look at a lot of other industries, and I'd like to cross combine them. So I pick something out of futuristic movies or whatever, and then bring it back to the more human scale, to the authentic qualities of. Once I did a design for a client whereby I only used borrowed materials, so all the things I found in old houses, and to create the atmosphere of the past, but in a new setting, for instance. So these are the games I play.
Amazing. Well, thanks a lot for sharing. And again, I really encourage, if you can, to have a look online on the Möbius House. It was really like exploring this first of your work that generated this curiosity, because here the atmospheric presence, in a sense, is very powerful. Well, maybe now let's move to AI. I can already see some questions actually specifically on how you're using AI and what's your kind of conception of AI. And maybe actually let's ask as a first question a question from Gabriela Leonhong. I hope I'll well pronounce your name. Who said, "How can AI help architecture become more emotionally intelligent rather than just more efficient?"
I sometimes, of course, I mean, since we now using a lot of AI in also here in the studio, it's flabbergasting what AI can do. I'm deeply impressed of what opportunities are of AI. So we fully dived into it, and we are enthusiastic about using AI. But but don't forget, it is your friend. It is not. It doesn't give you intuition. AI doesn't have a taste. So you have to be very smart in how you distinguish what is technology and a tool. And I think we're going to talk about it later. Is AI a tool or is it more? But make sure that you are call it the director of an orchestra. You have to guide the design into a material world, but it's another world than AI. I mean, the world of things you touch and things you feel. And luckily enough, now we discover more and more that we have more senses than the 4 or 5 senses we have always talked about. Make use of all these senses, of the things in the real world, who are actually going to be more important in the future of design, because AI is so fast and so intelligent and gives you so much opportunity. But make sure that you stay or stick to the physical world, because that is the other part where we should give now more emphasis on. If you have on the one side the incredible expansion of technology, that's a good thing, but expand further also on experiential and qualities of spaces in the real world. So that's my philosophy, and I hope that is also a good advice for students, because I see that with my own students, everyone goes in AI, or maybe I can set up a tech company with this idea or a startup. But yeah, they forget what it is to train yourself to know everything about the way how you can build wonderful stuff, and become use trained judgment, as I sometimes call it, of things you have seen in the real world, because there we have to still learn from to improve that. So architecture can be improved in the real world, but then you have to know things of the real world of architecture.
You have within UNStudio a specific unit, actually, pioneering unit dedicated to research and development, including in AI.
Yeah.
It's I think UNSense, isn't it?
Yeah, UNSense. We changed UNSense into a new lab inside. It's called research and development now, and we have different layers now under what UNSense used to be, because UNSense was a separate company, but that was, UNSense was not as successful as I was hoping for, in the sense that we learned everything from UNSense and then adapted in the studio itself, because there it started to flourish much better than in separate companies. So, but anyway, yeah, go ahead. What was your question?
Have you like a kind of AI use that are already established within then UNStudio practice today?
Oh yes, yes. We started very early. We have we use various tools. We have a carbon tool where we quickly can test the quick early design of what kind of embodied carbon is in the building, or what kind of performance carbon is in the project. You can calculate. So we discover fantastic things like everyone thought for a long time that building in wood is carbon friendly, but not always, we discover, because it's then sometimes better to work with recycled steel or recycled concrete, because then you can reduce the carbon footprint much more. But we use for all that AI tools.
Within UNStudio, for you right now, what is the most interesting potential of AI? Where do you see the most value from the daily operation of UNStudio?
Like I said, it's something, I think, is that you work with it yourself as well. You use probably also AI as a wonderful tool. So it's a good tool. It speeds up efficiency, but it's also a collaborator, and it's also what you called, I think, once. It can also be seen as a very important paradigm shift. So we started tools by automating a simple task, by enabling and focus design qualities to the next level, and monitoring and training our staff with all these, tools we have now developed. And we protected our own AI system also, so that nobody else can come into it, and that we can also develop our own improvements with it, coming from our clients or the specialists we work with. So that's the tool. But then, see it also as your friend, because it can help you with the design, of course, here and there. But we have to be careful that it is an intelligent partner only. It helps you thinking about opportunities, and it's not so that it gives you a finite solution. In our case, we always correct it, edit it, and like I said, it doesn't have intuition. So you have to steer the design or the insights from day one to the next day. So being the conductor of AI is there very important. And in the world of the paradigm shift, you could say, of AI, we see it as a critical skill that becomes an expert. It's an expert. It creates. It gives you not a taste, like I said, but it gives you a particular forms of judgment. But you have to give meaning to it. That's the most important. You have to give it a name. You have to give it a story. You have to make sure that you create still originality with AI, because AI can maybe sometimes suggest that it creates a certain form of originality, but I think it's not powerful. It's not powerful enough to give the originality, at least what we like. But we are we are really on top of it, and use our own design tools also with AI. So yeah, we implement. But that UNStudio was always, from the 90s onwards, interested in technology. We have always been on top of it. But but like I said, technology is not the key of design alone. The tool is not the only thing. And I refer often to painters, like think of, Andy Warhol when he used for the first time together with Liechtenstein, as an artist, silkscreen. That was a fantastic new tool to come up with new artworks. But of course, Andy Warhol was always very smart to add some layers towards it by hand himself, but always kind of edited and made better and give it a very interesting tweak, or he almost gave it another such a interesting new touch that the tool was only a provider for the ideas. And that's what I like the most of good tools, technological oriented tools.
There is a very interesting comment from Charles Finlay, who actually greatly resonates with what you just shared. So I'm going to read it. I took a course in grade school called City as Cinema, which explores the dialogue between film and text and city design, an experience so great to that your work is inspired by this text. When discussing AI and modern technologies, I wonder if you have thoughts on its impact in enabling narratives or design that will inform architecture that some science fiction films or other texts might have done in the past.
Yeah, I think yes. I think that of course. I mean, like I said, AI on all the levels of storytelling, giving you new insights, or it could make already movies today. So it's kind of shocking how fast it goes. It's all possible. But like I said, how that is still the virtual world. If you have a movie, that is still the virtual world. That's beautiful about movies. You step in another world, and but don't forget, the storytelling is something else, and architecture is also something else, because architecture is not in the virtual world. It can be designed in the virtual world, but still it needs to be brought to reality. But of course, I'm totally agreeing with this text. I think we can actually learn a lot by speculating a lot. I do that a lot. I like to know sometimes from trend setters or trend predictors, that what they think over the next 5-6 years, what is going to happen in the profession. And we need to know. I think we are responsible as architects to know where we stand in 2030 or 35, because some of the projects we get, they take 10 years or 8 years. Still, the building industry is still call it conservative. We are not having robots or drones yet who can do a building in 5 minutes, like we have AI. So yes, no, but So I like to speculate. I like the storytelling suggestion. I think is a good point.
This idea, you said it several times, and I read it in several hours of your interview, this idea of creating more complexity, more architectural complexity. Can you just share why it's so important for you?
I like complexity there where it is ordered, so it is actually, it sounds funny to say, well, complexity is complexity, and it will always stay complex. But I think you can order a complexity. You can give it a system. So a Mercedes-Benz museum is a complex building, highly complex, because it's having 13 plateaus, and it's like a double helix. So it's not one spiral going down, but there are 2 spirals going down. So if you walk in a building, you're quite often getting a bit lost. But that's what I like. I like to give this labyrinthian quality to architecture, and and that you lose your way is fun, because then you might like to come back, and then, oh God, I missed something. I have to. Okay, maybe next year I come back to the museum, or next week. I'm interested in unexpected double readings of spaces. So that's why the complexity comes in. But don't forget, as you know, in architecture and also in urban planning, we cannot make it too complex, because then one doesn't want to build it. So you have to give it a system.
Thanks, Ben. Talking about urban planning, we have the great pleasure actually of now welcoming on stage an Urban AI member. His name is Ariel Neumann. You might know Ariel if you've been following Urban AI. Like, he is an Urban AI member, like instructor at the Urban AI Academy. He was also a speaker at previous Urban AI conversations. Hi, Ariel.
Hello.
Hello.
Ariel, you're also a research scientist at the MIT Media Lab, urban planner. Well, what would you like to share, or what are your reactions following this first exchange with Ben?
No, first of all, thank you so much, Ben, for joining us with this lovely conversation, and thank you for lifetime contribution to our field, and really, thinking computation before it was trendy and hip.
Thanks.
Thank you for that. I want to ask kind of a more general question about technology in general, and specifically in what we're currently seeing with this new trend of AI, machine learning, deep learning. We all know, I think, that postmodern design and postmodern architecture challenged modernism by its embrace of complexity, playfulness, and their rejection to fixed rules and constructs. Now, for, I think, 6-7 decades now, we're seeing computation in architecture actually doing the opposite. It's privileging rigidity, accuracy, and a degree of control. But I think that what we're seeing over the past 2 or 3 years is that with AI, this rigidity is now being challenged by the lack of rules, the inconsistencies, and some might even say the humanization of data-driven processes. You ask an LLM how much is 4 plus 7, and it will say 15, right? And you ask again, and you get another response. So this accuracy and rigidity is now somewhat dissolving. I wonder if we can define this moment as the era of somewhat postmodern computing, where the rigidity is now dissolving. And if so, I wonder how you, in your work, see that postmodern moment reshaping architectural practice beyond form and representation.
Wow, an interesting question. Very complex also to answer, because we just started with this call it revolution in architecture. It's quite a kind of a revolution. I compare it with the revolution of moving from the drawing board to CAD, for instance. That was also a little shock in architecture, to all move to the computer. But the whole use of AI is a new shock, and a good. I mean, I'm positive, as you know, about technology, but I agree what you're reading, I like your possible worry also. There is a kind of worry in your answer or your question, and I agree with that we are in a phase where we have to be careful that we are not becoming, that we are killing creativity and the human aspect of the way how we use AI, and how AI is going to use us, because that's the danger, as you maybe suggest. I see that already happening a little bit in architecture itself, that we all became quite generative. It's kind of, I mean, it's almost impossible to recognize what is big doing versus UNStudio or who else, or Snowhead, so we all a bit in the same league, and I think that's not the fault of AI, but it is the fault of many things. Many things happening in the profession, the speed and the incredible amount of pressure on projects lately. But that is maybe an interesting thing for all of us to think about. What is it what we need to do now? What can AI do, or what can technology do, I should say, towards the way how we can create more originality or more diversity in the uncontrolled manner of the way how AI is actually treating us in a way. So where I like to think of is to develop new concepts of control, like you said. So new concepts of, the earlier book I wrote on design models. Have you ever seen that? Because that book was written too early, because that was all about how can we edit parametric principles of design in a design process. So because it's so uncontrolled that before you make spaghetti. So you want controlled information going into the project. So my argument is that you cannot bring 22 ambitions into a project, but only 3. But then you need to control it through design models, and that is in order to control technology. And now with AI, now suddenly design models is becoming even more important for our design processes.
Right.
So I'm thinking of these things to bring back in the design process, or like what I earlier said about organizational strategies. Well, you know everything about it. So how can you work with data and the flow of people and user groups around the train station, for instance, and what do you need to do in order to make it the train station more safe and more open, so you don't have too many columns. But what can you do with the user groups? Do you add some more programs around the site so that the station becomes an urban hub instead of a station? Hopefully these new tools can give us a new control, a concept of control, as I said, for the way how we then also become innovative with it and become hopefully original with it, because that's what is needed, I think, at the moment in design.
Right, it's the challenge of moving from 3 parameters to 3 billion parameters, right? How do we
Exactly.
control so many? Maybe as a quick follow-up, Hubert, if I may, I wonder, Ben, if you can take us behind the curtain in your firm currently. You have probably many incoming interns, fresh out of school, very proficient with the new tools and technologies. How do you instill that idea of bringing control into the mix, of not surrendering ourselves into the power of these 3 billion parameters?
That's a good question again. Well, I can honestly tell you we are in the middle of a process where we rethink, should you have a design board, or do you have a kind of maybe an AI tool? What can maybe help you, so that that all the information is going into the design process, but so well prepared that it is actually that it gives you maybe opportunities to have already pre-cooked information going into the design process, what is intelligent. So, and we educate everyone around the way how, let's say, through a particular design process, this could actually make more intelligent projects. But we are in the beginning of it, so I cannot fully tell you everything about it. But don't underestimate that. Still, you need to give it a good story. It needs to, a good story in the sense of, it needs to melt with the location, it needs to melt with the client's brief, it needs to melt with, give it an attraction that you that you like that space or that building or that theater where I maybe talked about before. So and it needs a synthesis of all these layers. So to become empathetic also, I mean, AI doesn't give you any empathetic quality. Empathy is maybe getting more and more important in architecture. So what you said, the human aspect becomes key. That's what where we really focus on. If we for a long time believe, and you talk about modernism and postmodernism, but in that time, the visual aspect of architecture, and for a long time in the history of architecture, the visual aspect of architecture and the aesthetics of it was key in the design process. But today, I bet that it's going to be, and tomorrow, I bet it's going to be more going into the direction of the aesthetics of the experience of a space.
Yeah.
So that becomes an interesting paradigm shift. So that the two need to become more in balance.
I see.
Might have maybe a follow-up question actually on two elements you shared. First on the aesthetic of experience, and also on this idea of adding parameters, maybe moving to 3D, which I think is really fascinating. So to the both of you, can you share in an ideal world some parameter you would like to be able to play with, in a sense?
Well, I'm actually, like I said, I'm super interested in other disciplines. I'm incredible fascinated in music. For instance, I've always said, wow, if architecture could do the same what music can do to the bones of your body, if I hope you like music, because if music can touch your bones so intensely, how can architecture do the same there? Because it's much more difficult with architecture, because it's a bit more static, and it's not. Of course, we know wonderful spaces and qualities of architecture where you're luckily enough touched. But I would go easily for a time of a research where AI can help me a little bit with how music can give me more depth in the way that architecture can do that the same. That's one of the things. But I can give you an endless list. The amount of things on my list of I want to research, that's endless.
Amazing. Ariel, do you also want to share maybe?
Yeah, but I'm a bit biased here, Hubert, because as you know, my main interest shifted from a decade of designing buildings to a decade of thinking of how people use those buildings. So kind of avoiding the discussion about the design, the details, the facades, but really thinking about human behavior. And so the parameter that I am mostly intrigued by, and the one that I'm trying to bring into my work and model also using AI, is really human behavior. How can we put a person in a building and let them experience, not just move through the building through traditional simulations of the 1990s where you see the bottlenecks and the challenges, but really, what do you experience as you move through a corridor, through a larger room, through high ceiling, through low ceiling, doors are left, doors are right, this color, the other color, and get an understanding of what we sense in our buildings. We put so much effort in everything that we build, but we know so little about how humans eventually experience them.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is kind of a critical element that AI can potentially bring into the mix. Having another tool in your toolbox that can help you simulate human behavior in your designs.
Yeah, wonderful what you're saying, and I totally agree. I mean, if you would said to me 7 years ago, who is an experienced designer, I didn't know who that was. I didn't know even that it was a discipline.
Yeah.
Sorry, but now I mean, I think I've around 6 to 7 experienced designers in the studio, and like you do. We do a lot of cognitive research, because people, you've probably done it all, but with Google, you can test stress levels in airports or in train stations, and people get highly stressed when they can't find a way or when the signs are not working. So I think today that is such a powerful knowledge to use in design, and I think this aspect of cognitive science, or the whole psychology of the senses of experiencing architecture in a totally new way, I see that also there as an enormous opportunity, enormous. But the most important is how do you edit it, and how you guide it, and how you steer it into design models, as I said, or organizational strategies, and that it then gives you also a space what then really works according to what you described is tough, because because your clients are not. For instance, you maybe know that we did the headquarters of Booking.com in Amsterdam. So that building, you cannot believe it. That building is, luckily enough, one of the most health-oriented, sustainable projects, at least in this region. And we were able to reduce down sick leave. We were pushing up productivity in the building, or at least that's what we heard from the HR specialist. The people came much more back to the office again. And one of the latest comments is that the ones who work there say, well, it's like if you live, if you work, it is here as if you work in a resort. So it's like working in a resort, because we have many plants and high quality of air and acoustics and all these things. I need to really go with you through the building, or I mean, for the listener or the ones online, it's difficult to explain everything in detail. But this client, it was not only my idea to do this. They wanted to have also a recruiting machine. We went to other tech companies and studied, or the Googles and whatever, and they were not happy with it. They wanted to have something for people there, for people only there to stimulate innovation and talent, and how to make a building more responsible with responsible environments. And that was such a relief to do a building where all the things I was already researching on for so many years, to bring that into one project. We were just lucky, and you would like it. It brings a lot of things together on the level you are also working on, and I think this is the future. Technology can give you a lot, and can give you a lot of speed and efficiency and new opportunities and intelligence. It's all wonderful, but this end result was for me the most important. Yeah, and I think that's where the future of architecture is definitely going to. Yeah.
Hubert, maybe one last closing question on my end, very short. You mentioned your clients, and so I'm wondering if you have encountered or seen clients coming to you with AI tools, in their back pocket, and saying, "Do that, give me that. I want this." Versus maybe what they might have before, which was an agglomeration of some ideas and some concepts, and now they can, just ask for the building they want. They come to you and ask for you to build it.
Yeah. That's the scary part. This is actually that was also in my closing remark. I had in mind to plan that, is that's the scary part of our profession right now, that we have to stand up towards the quality where we stand for. And that happens to us. You're totally right. We have clients who come and say, "Listen, we have looked at it, but this is how you have to do it." And I say, "No. That's, you think that it works, but we have done a real scientific research, and we know that the heat load on your building will be much higher on that level, or your views are not as good as you think, because we ticked the boxes." So. Yeah, and you're right that clients now use AI, so much that lately I had a client saying to me, "Yeah, my son did just a quick sort of, and now this. What do you think? Could you do this?" Yeah, and then I think, "Oh, of course we can do it, but it's not UNStudio then."
In medicine, it's called Dr. Google. Right? You get to the physician.
Yeah. Nice, Dr. Google. Yeah, not Dr. Google. Yeah, funny. No, but that's the danger, and let's be careful that we stand up towards originality and the experience of architecture and good quality of building. To control the quality of the built environment. Don't forget, I often show AI images and or renderings and AI images against the reality, and that reality still fights, the AI image, because the reality is something you can touch. Yeah.
Amazing. Well,
Right.
thanks a lot, really, Ben,
Thank you.
Ariel, for this fascinating conversation. I think we will end on this beautiful note showing the importance of character, resistance sometimes. It was really a great pleasure of having you, Ben, of having you, Ariel. That's already the end of this Urban AI conversation. It's already available on YouTube and on LinkedIn. And next Urban AI conversation will actually be in a month approximately. We will be welcoming Carla Saldana Ochoa, and we'll be actually discussing the role of AI to adapt cities to climate change. So, a topic, in a sense, we've been approaching today. Thanks. And
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
For the conversation, and good luck with everything. We keep in touch, like always. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. Bye.